He was propelled to power with an 80-seat majority and was hailed one of the most victorious Tory leaders in recent memory. But now, 9 months on, it's not been a great start for Boris Johnson. It's not necessarily the context in which they're turning on him, but the character of those who are doing so.
I want to go through our overall plan for beating this new coronavirus.
I recently wrote a piece where I had to look back at some of the early coronavirus press conferences, and you have a very boosterish PM pre-COVID talking about turning the tide of coronavirus in 12 weeks and summoning this kind of Churchillian spirit to beat this thing.
We must act like any wartime government and do whatever it takes.
And now, all these months on, after he was effectively nearly killed by this virus and ended up in intensive care, we are presented with a different Boris Johnson, one who is more cautious, one who has lost some of that libertarian spirit in favour of trying to clamp down on people breaking the rules. That's a full pivot that must be uncomfortable for him.
And I'm sorry about that. I wish that we did not have to take this step.
But what is most damaging is the fall in their fortunes since the pandemic began. I think the difficulty for Boris Johnson right now is summed up by Sir Graham Brady's revolt against the coronavirus rules. Sir Graham Brady is the chairman of the 1922 committee of Tory backbenchers. That's traditionally a body of people that would very much be pro-Boris. In fact, you could argue that many of them helped to propel him to power. So for that group of people to turn on the Prime Minister is significant. It's not necessarily the context in which they're turning on him, but the character of those who are doing so. And I think that's problematic. You can have this Dominic Cummings approach to government, which is very much, well, I don't really care about Tory MPs, I don't even really like them. And there are some famous Cumming quotes from the past about how Tories don't really care about poor people. But eventually the Tory party comes back to bite you. And I think anyone with any knowledge of Conservative history knows that you cannot alienate the party that propelled you to power, that parliamentary party. It doesn't sit well with the MPs themselves, doesn't necessarily sit well with voters. They want their elective representatives to actually have the power to represent them in Parliament. They don't want them to be swept aside by this kind of Downing Street machinery that just ploughs ahead regardless of what the parliamentary party thinks of what they're doing. I think more worrying for Boris Johnson is all of this talk about his competence.
It's 6 in a home or 6 in hospitality, but as I understand it, not 6 outside. That's the situation.
At the weekend, we saw that polling revealing that for the first time since April, when Sir Keir Starmer took control of the Labour Party, Labour have overtaken the Tories in the polls. So back when he was just elected with an 80-seat majority, I think they were on 56%, and now they could be down to as little as 38. That is a massive drop when it comes to public confidence in Boris Johnson's leadership, and of course that's problematic.
Our lives can no longer be put on hold. Life means more than simply existing. We find meaning and hope through our friends and family, through our...
The rise of Rishi Sunak does pose a problem. This is a Prime Minister at the beginning of his 4-year term, now having to compete with a leadership contender. That's not to say that the Chancellor is putting his name forward or there is any bid or challenge, but that people are even talking about Johnson's successor when he's only been in Downing Street for 5 minutes is difficult. It's also difficult that Sunak is such an accomplished public speaker.
I want to reassure every British citizen we will support jobs, we will support incomes, we will support businesses.
Clearly very much in command of himself and his brief.
We have taken decisive action to protect our economy, but people are anxious about losing their job.
That he has been giving out free money.
We will do all we can to give everyone the opportunity of good and secure work.
The tide will of course turn on Rishi Sunak as far as the public's concerned when he has to pull the money back and when people start losing their jobs, and if there's mass unemployment, then the stature of the Chancellor who has to manage that kind of financial crisis completely changes. But for now, it's problematic to have talk of Rishi Sunak as Boris Johnson's successor. And maybe none of these debates matter. Maybe it's going to come down to the old Clintonian phrase, it's about the economy, stupid. When it comes to the polls, this is going to be about how easily and readily Britain has recovered, not only from coronavirus, but post-Brexit. We're only a year into his administration, not even that if you count the December election. And actually what really counts is how the Tories are performing in 3 years' time or 3.5 years' time. So that remains to be seen. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you would like to watch more analysis and comment like this one, please subscribe to the Telegraph YouTube channel.